have to like manually click on the Viridian presentation.
Sounds
Okay,
horrible.
then let's start it. We can start the recording. Let's go.
Yeah.
Get the show on the road.
Good. Rajiv, are you there? Or hopefully you are, because then we're going to hand the mic to you. Or Rune,
Yep.
you're going to go for longer. Okay.
I'm here. Good
All
to
right.
go.
All right. Welcome everyone to our first community call on Discord. Please bear with us while we test the new features. We're going to be recording this call. We had a few in the past that were not recorded, but we want to make this more accessible for a wider audience, and so people understand what we're working for, what we're trying to achieve and accomplish. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. Remember that you need to click on the presentation for it to see it. So you need to kind of like choose what you're seeing. In the recording, it will be fine though. So yes, with that in mind, any chats can go to the any questions can go to the chat that you can open by clicking on the voice channel. And if you have anything to say, you can say it there. With that in mind, thanks again, and Rune, take it away.
Yep. Good morning, good day, good evening, everybody. It's a new world, including, as Juan just said, we are now recording the community calls and making them more accessible in Discord. And also, it's going to be it's a bit more structured than just the Rune radio that you're used to for the last couple of weeks. So today we have like a really cool overview from Viridian advisors that have been working with the accessibility reward and demand analysis for USDS, which is like actually the most important thing if you're like a Sky holder or you're a you are exposed to the Sky ecosystem in some way and you care about its health and growth and success, then there's simply nothing more important than USDS demand. And typically it's been very hard to kind of understand stablecoin demand, especially decentralized stablecoin demand. So I think it's pretty cool that there is some level of capacity to do this now. And it's definitely something that is well suited to be like a regular update that the community should be getting. So it's about time that that can now be structured properly and presented properly. But also, of course, this Wednesday 8 p.m. CEST call slot that we're using now, and we've been using for the last couple of months, will be kind of the prime time for all sorts of presentations and information about Sky as a whole, but especially also showcasing all the stars that are coming, right? I mean, there's so much stuff being worked on in Sky, and it's going to be super exciting to show that to everyone. But yeah, today it's going to be demand side analysis and overview for USDS. And I repeat, super important, super exciting and interesting if you are interested in the success of Sky. Then, well, as we go through the presentation, like I'll also be in the audience, but also people can, feel free to ask questions at any time. And I might also jump in if there's something more complicated and we start going down some rabbit hole related to specific like Atlas rules that might interact with this stuff. But other than that, it'll just be Rajiv from Viridian going over all this cool stuff. And then after that, we'll do like a classic Q&A where I will just answer like any questions that people might have, if there are any. And that's it. Let's hope we can keep it short and sweet and to the point, and but with good content for the the very dedicated insider audience that we have for this call. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Rajiv. Let's get into the good stuff.
Thank you, Rune. I hope everyone hears me okay and can see the presentation. I guess I'm happy to be the guinea pig for this new format. I'll jump straight in with an intro for those who don't know me. I'm Rajiv, part of the small team at Viridian Advisors. We've been contributing to the ecosystem for, well, it's been almost 4 years now, having originally joined as members of the Growth Core unit, and more recently in support of Endgame, we've worked across multiple projects across RWA, supply and demand side, all of which have had various learnings that have been incorporated, in one form or the other into the primitives framework that we have today. So today, the objective is to shine some light on the accessibility rewards primitive, and it's actually impossible to do that without also talking about integration boost. The two, although different in focus and mechanisms, they actually go very much hand in hand, and together they form the stablecoin demand side primitives. And the first thing I'd like to actually say about them before even going into more detail is that we're not talking about future hypothetical state. These primitives, these are very much live and operational. And as we go through this, I hope you see that the operational infra in place has actually been built to scale with the stars. So this is something that is being used. Accessibility rewards is focused on incentivizing distribution, whereas integration boost is focused on allowing integration partners to receive the SSR on unrewarded USDS. So USDS, for example, not in the form of SUSDS or locked up in token rewards. The illustrations on the right show the most common use cases we've had today. And as with everything, with each new use case, we learn, we iterate, we incorporate the learnings. But with accessibility rewards, it's really been focused on the use case of savings apps. So if you think of front ends such as SparkFi or Skydot Money, what we allow them to do is tag the deposits that come via their front ends. And as those deposits are tagged, that gets credited to them. So they tag with a referral code. And as we look at that transactional volume being processed through their distribution platforms, that generates income for them in the form of accessibility rewards. And it's not just for their own front ends, it's actually for all the front ends of integration partners that they manage. So the stars will share the accessibility rewards with their partner network. And the idea is to really incentivize the stars, not just to drive demand via their own front end, actually to sort of create and foster and nurture easy lever for them to pull as an income generator. We'll go through exactly how to do it, and you'll see, this is live, it's operational, and it's very easy to use. And I would sort of strongly encourage any sort of prospective stars or those working with the ecosystem, the sooner you start tagging, the sooner you start accruing rewards. It's a plug and play system that's very easy, and I sort of call it tag and earn. Get it tagged, and we start monitoring and accruing. With integration boost, the use case today has been more focused on the lending apps, and that's because that's where we see the USDS markets in their unrewarded forms. So if you think of the likes of Aave on mainnet or Camino Drift on Solana, that's where this has been applied to date. And what it allows is for the project to earn the SSR on their net USDS balances, and in turn give that as a bonus, or apply that as a bonus on the USDS markets, making the USDS markets more competitive on their platforms, driving more USDS demand, and in turn, for the stars that are managing those relationships, that additional demand ends up resulting in increased accessibility rewards as a distribution reward. And that's why the two go very much hand in hand together. So that's an overview of both, and sort of focusing a little more now on the accessibility reward program. What's it worth? What's the actual incentive here? And I sort of put in a quick comment that our early integration partners who signed up on the first wave program, they actually did have an additional early adopter rate. But moving forward, and as we scale with the stars, we have a model that we believe is long-term sustainable, that rewards the integration partners with a rate of 0.1% on an annualized basis of the attributed USDS balances that go through their front ends, or that are attributed to their front ends. And we'll talk through the methodology for that. So for every $100 million attributed, that results in 100K of annual rewards. For the stars, they actually get double that. They get a 0.2% annualized rate of everything that's attributed to their front ends, and they also share the reward with the integration partners that they manage. So for volume or transactional volume that's coming through the integration partners, half goes to the integration partner, half goes to the stars that are managing that relationship. So again, the incentive for stars really is to grow demand, be it through front ends or partnerships. And of course, we know stars hold some extremely valuable relationships in the market and are able to drive that biz dev activity to really help scale within their spheres of influence. This gets even more attractive as you start to look at the Pioneer system. Again, I'll put a proviso here that the Pioneer system is relatively new. Rune has posted about it. I think there'll be a lot of learnings that will be incorporated into it as the first Pioneers go live. But as is, the Pioneers benefit from everything the stars do, so 0.1% annualized reward for the volume going through their front ends, plus they share the reward with the integrators that they manage, but they also get 0.1% of all the unattributed balances on the Pioneer chain. So everything on the Pioneer chains that is not already being claimed in, by other stars, for example, that all goes to the Pioneer, and it gives them an extra incentive to really grow their ecosystem. And there are additional benefits for the Pioneers. I mean, one I'll mention is the Pioneer Incentive Pool, which also gives them an incentive to receive the SSR on any USDS within their ecosystem that isn't already being rewarded through a scheme such as Integration Boost. So there's a lot to absorb there. I'm sort of conscious of that. I'd sort of summarize it as for the Pioneers, it's really all about creating a very strong moat for them to expand Sky to new ecosystems, and giving them that comfort that they have these almost exclusive benefits for a certain time. So I've talked about the attributed USDS balances, and what do I mean about that? And that really all feeds into the methodology behind these calculations. So attributed balances is really us calculating the net deposits associated to a referral code. And the reason we do that is because on chain, we're only able to capture the gross deposits. We're not able to capture withdrawals. And that's just the way the code has been implemented, at least on mainnet. And so if we paid out on gross deposits, we'd end up overpaying because, we're not catering into account the withdrawals. And so somebody who deposits, withdrawals, we'd only catch those deposits. So what we've done is we're doing some off-chain data indexation where we actually also look at all the withdrawals, and we calculate. And this is what we think is a very fair way to reward our distribution channels. But through net deposits, we're able to actually, you use a concept of pots where we're looking at funds in addresses subcategorized by referral code. And summarizing it, it's sort of, deposit transactions that come through a referral channel, they increase pot balances. Withdrawal transactions will decrease those pot balances on a first in, first out basis. And transfers between users, which is only applicable for SUSDS, not for token rewards, that maintains the referral association. So if somebody comes in through one integration or through one distribution channel, and then they transfer that SUSDS to another user, the introducing distribution channel will still be accredited with those balances. In no way have I done justice to explaining that methodology, but the good thing is, as with everything at the DAO, all the methodologies, the source code for the calculations, it's all open source. It's all available on a GitHub repository that's managed by Stable Lab, another Sky ecosystem actor who have actually built the data indexation part for this. So anyone who's interested in getting into the nitty gritty, and hopefully you see my screen flip over to this, can go through this link and sort of see it all for yourselves. It's quite meticulously detailed and with source code included. You know, the idea, as always, is that once built, this is available to any ecosystem actor to not only verify, but also be able to replicate and even build upon and contribute to. So we've talked about, you know, the importance of this being, it's live, the infrastructure being in place, but I'll also just highlight what an easy lever it is to pull for stars to generate income, not just conceptually, but also, you know, the whole technical integration that's required. The whole system relies on the use of a referral code. Moving forward, that referral code is the whole process of issuing, managing, generating for partners. These referral codes will be done within the powerhouse toolkit for stars, and that will automatically include a pro-sale approval flow that goes to core GovOps. It will even include all the downstream integration to be incorporated into the monthly payment cycle. And this has all been built and tested with our early users. And you know, one thing I mentioned in terms of the operational infra that's been put in place, it's really been put in place, but also tested so that it can scale. So the way integrators and stars actually use this referral code, it's very easy. It's just any interaction with the Sky contracts. Use your referral code, that will be captured on chain. It will show up in our systems and it will be processed. So when calling or when swapping to on mainnet, when swapping to SUSDS, just include the ref code when calling the deposit and mint functions. When depositing into the token rewards contract, just use the ref code when calling the stake function. The implementation on Arbitrum and Base is slightly different, and that's again technical reasons behind this. But it's actually the referral code is used when calling the swap function on the light PSM, and I'm guessing that will be the model for L2s. That actually does give us some additional data points that we can capture on L2s that right now we are not able to capture on mainnet, and we'll see what analytics we can build on the back of that. Or for the ecosystem can build on the back of that as stars really look to, you know, embrace this methodology and further scale it within their own ecosystems. And for the pioneers, again, I think there'll be learnings, but right now at this early stage, the easiest thing for us to do is I believe to just track the balances held on the bridge contracts. So with Solana, I think, and the upcoming star for Solana and others, I think we'll sort of take the learnings and further refine how we do this. But again, the core, you know, you'll see this is minimal effort, minimum integration expertise required. And that's been our experience with anyone who's incorporated and integrated with the code base to date. I again really would encourage anyone who's building, looking to potentially form a star. The sooner you start tagging, the sooner you start earning, the sooner we can start tracking that and accruing rewards. And once it's tagged, it automatically shows up in all our monitoring systems. Again, all open source, fully transparent. I've shared the links here. I'd love to actually take some time to go through them. But whilst they all overlap to a certain extent, what we're really looking to track here, that there's some different lenses. So the first one, it's all about adoption. And in that case, we're looking at, where is the USDS and SUSDS supply being held? And since we did it for USDS and SUSDS, we thought, well, why don't we just look at the entire competitive market landscape for yield stablecoins? And so, I'll pause briefly, but then go into these dashboards and show that. What's more appropriate for the accessibility rewards is the dashboard that actually shows the distribution channels, and that captures all the tagged activity by referral code of our distribution channels. And so you can see all the gross events, you can query that. We've done that by feature, so for SUSDS, for token rewards, but also on the L2s, base and Arbitrum, and some interesting patterns that we already see forming there. And lastly, the off-chain data indexation, that's all about the attribution. And that's, on the top of those attributed USDS balances, that's what we use to calculate the rewards. And there is a dedicated dashboard built by the Stable Labs team to track those attributed balances. And actually, that's also accessible by API and has already been used by core GovOps team to receive the payment calculations at the end of the month. So, there's a full sort of end-to-end automation here in preparation for scaling. But I've sort of, like before sort of maybe pausing and going into some of these dashboards and sort of seeing if there are any questions, I guess some of the core things I did want to highlight about the demand side primitives here. The first thing is, they are very much live, current state. The operational infra for them end to end has been put in place. It's been tested. It's ready to scale. It's ready to be built upon. Everything's transparent and now ready for the stars to take to the next level. They are very easy to use, and again, the call is, if any work you're doing with these contracts, tag and start earning. I wish we had actually started tagging earlier for Sky.money and SparkFi, because actually we only started to get full coverage from Jan onwards, and you'll see that in the dashboards. And anyone who's sort of looked at the primitives, like I sometimes feel when you sort of see it through all the noise, they come across as complex, but these really are very easy to use modular building blocks for stars, and I'm sure that will be the case with all the others that are also available. So maybe that's a good point to just pause and see if there are any immediate questions. But I do hope there's time to actually go through some of these dashboards, and I can show you some of the live data that we're capturing.
Thank you, Rajiv. Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat. I can read them, and either you or Rune can answer them. The first one is this permissionless? Is it a permissionless process, or your referral code needs to be approved? And yeah, Rune was mentioning the need for a star. So maybe Rune, you can give more details there.
Yeah, so I can just quickly talk about how you actually tap into this. Obviously, the goal is that it should be very easy to get going with this. However, there's also going to be some kind of standard, so it's not like literally anyone. And it's not clear exactly what the restriction at what point, you won't be able to get the accessibility reward, but it's probably going to be like from like things that are obviously bad or wrong, basically. So for any like normal person, this is not going to apply to you, and it should be assumed to be effectively permissionless. But you have to work with a star. However, there's going to be a huge amount of stars. As a result, there will be like a marketplace for the easiest kind of onboarding flow. to get set up with a referral code. So in the long run, it will feel effectively permissionless. In the short run, it's actually possible to go directly to Viridian and work with them to actually get set up with referral codes. So maybe Rajiv can touch on that in a second. But there's one more thing I just want to really mention, because it was like a clarification from the earlier slide. It's just that there was some. So one thing is that this PSM thing, like the PSM on Spark and Base, they're like called PSM3s, and they work like slightly different than the light PSM. So just in case people aren't confused, thinking that the same light PSM system is what's being used cross-chain. And then I also want to point out that actually Base and Arbitrum are special cases, so they are not kind of standardized Sky primitives the way their SUSDS setup works. And there's going to be like a completely standardized like SUSDS Sky primitive that is likely going to be the thing that the Pioneer stars set up on all the different chains. And yeah, like I just wanted to also call that out, because I think some people might misunderstand and believe that the Pioneer chains don't have SUSDS at all, and they only have the Pioneer system, but they kind of have both basically. So that's obviously like a cornerstone of the multi-chain strategy, that there will be SUSDS all over the place, and it will be possible to track all of it, and it will be possible to get accessibility reward for all of that across all the chains. And I think, there's some questions here about like the details of Pioneer stars and so on, but I think we should save that for after, and instead just get into the actual exciting stuff. I mean, I was pumping all the demand side and analysis. However, to kind of really understand it, we had to go through this overview of the accessibility reward, but now we're getting to the actual exciting stuff. So I would like to get into that, and then we can go to deeper questions on these various things.
Cool. Maybe I hope you're all seeing the screen and it's flicked to a June dashboard. So as we're sort of tracking demand patterns, as I mentioned, we sort of started obviously focused on USDS and SUSDS and thought, well, let's look at the entire competitive market landscape. So there was a recent report that came out from JP Morgan talking about this specific segment, which I'm sure many people saw, but it really highlighted their belief of the growth of what they're calling the yield bearing stable coins, or the yield coins, and they actually singled out 5, and those are the 5 that we're going to look to track. We were already tracking 3, so Sky, Athena, Usual, they also mentioned Biddle, and I believe Ondo. So we've got some fairly detailed view of where the supply is for each of these, as long as we're able to identify that. So Athena, for Usual, we've just included Biddle, and we'll add Ondo. But it's sort of encouraging to see a big TradFi powerhouse talking about this market segment with such enthusiasm. And of course, we're all converts, but to see that come just sort of really reinforced our need to track this and provide transparent analytics. So a few call outs. The first is, if we look at the pure yield bearing stable coins, and here we sort of separated between SUSDS, SUSDE, we carved those out, the Usual variant as well. I think the traction that we're seeing with SUSDS speaks for itself through 2025. By no means do I think these dashboards provide us with all the answers, but they sort of show us trends and allow us to ask questions, or even just to sort of monitor, where are incentives programs really delivering bang for buck? What's working? What's not working? Perhaps who others are having success, where are they having success? So looking at SUSDS over all holding groups, we know their incentives have been used to drive demand on Solana, and that will further be reinforced with a star. So something you can just track for yourselves. We know incentives in the form of integration boost have also been used on Aave, and you can see the results that that's driving through the year. We know Spark, as they expand various capabilities and features. I mean, we've already seen Base, Arbitrum, the inclusion of USDS on Spark. You can also see sort of the impact that has drilled down. And then, of course, our core features. So token rewards, off to a strong start. It sort of lost traction as DeFi yields went up, but then as DeFi yields have come down, we see that coming back. And of course, the savings contract, we've seen strong momentum there. And because that's the bulk of USD supply, we further break that down. So on the right side, it's actually, see the total actually matches the left side, but you can see where the holdings are for SUSDS. And again, hopefully this is just good insight for anyone who's interested. And of course, we know a big driver for SUSDS has actually been Athena. You can see that as the top holder. So anything that we're able to identify, we do, and we'll just keep building this out. Of course, as June, it's completely open for anyone to use. Same with Athena, and both for their the stable coin and the yield bearing coin. We break this down, and there's learnings to be found for anyone who's interested. If as you just sort of see what's actually driving upward trends and what's driving the downward trends, and there is a lot of cross holdings. Biddle will be one that's really interesting to watch. It's currently very largely backed by Athena, and of course we're going to make a big allocation. So just a quick sort of overview, but these are open for everyone to use as a requirement, and we'll keep building this out. What we really care about, and I guess what the holdings is something that's widely out there, but what we really care about for the purposes of accessibility rewards are the distribution channels. So whilst we also here includes the basic adoption metrics for USDS and SUSDS, what we're capturing that's new for everyone are the distribution channels by feature. And this is what you get, and it automatically flows through when stars start tagging their activity or integrators start tagging their activity. Because this is all gross, we need to be a little careful with the interpretations. Different use cases drive different sorts of behaviors, but you can see this at the top broken down by daily activity and monthly activity. In the monthly activity, you sort of got this one, for example, 1016, which I know is a yield aggregator platform that rebalances its portfolio. They're constantly coming in and out of the savings contract as they look to get the best yield for their portfolio. So that's overrepresented when it comes to gross activity, and that's exactly why we have this whole methodology that determines the net balances associated with each distribution channel. So we show this by SUSDS as one of the core features. You can also see the total of inputs, outputs, and the net balance that has on a daily basis. And actually something that to also mention is not all interactions with us are tagged. So anything that's untagged, we capture here as a -1. This is listed out. And the reason you see such a large amount of untagged activity is for the large protocol-to-protocol integrations, the trading bots, the crypto funds, they tend not to use front ends, but to do a direct integration with the smart contracts. And actually, I think, I sort of see this large untagged transactional volume as an opportunity for the stars to tap into some immediate revenue opportunities that exist. Because clearly, right now, we're only rewarding on what we can capture and is tagged on chain. As I mentioned, actually, you'll sort of see the amount that's tagged sort of shot up greatly in Jan, and that's because Jan is when we really started to see the incorporation of referral codes in some of the larger front ends. And the more we can do that, just the better insight we will have to distribution channels. So we see this for the savings contract. We've also broken it down in exactly the same way for token rewards, for Sky. The reality is, in the case of token rewards, we know our biggest distribution channels by far are our, I guess I call them internal front ends of SparkFi and Sky.money. But you can see the breakdown, the metrics, all here. We do the same for Chronicle. And also, as we've expanded to new chains, we're doing exactly the same tracking for adoption and distribution. Base has been a really interesting one to watch because you see very clearly that flow of funds as funds flow first into the ALM, they're then transferred to the PSM, and then they make their way to the wider market and all the various, through all the various discussions and BD activity that's happening there. And that growth has been very encouraging to see. The other perhaps interesting call out, I guess to be expected, is just how much of a larger amount of user base you have on Base versus something like mainnet, and just how much the smaller average balance is of holdings for SUSDS, suggesting this is where we're really starting to penetrate retail users, and I'm sure the same trend exists on Solana. So more distribution metrics on Base, again, on top of which, this is the raw data, on top of which we can index in the same way as we've done on mainnet, calculate accessibility rewards, and start distributing these. Right now, we're only calculating accessibility rewards on mainnet, but I think we're now getting to a place where we can start incorporating Base as well, because we're seeing the volumes there. Same for Arbitrum. It's obviously sort of lagging behind Base in the journey, but adoption and all the distribution metrics are here. And as we keep growing to new ecosystems, we'll keep growing this out. So the June dashboards, it really tracks everything that's completely open, on-chain. These are raw events. But for the data indexation, that's where we use the Force dashboard, which is a tool provided by Stable Labs. And it's really a front end to all the back-end data indexation and storage of balances that are calculated off-chain. But and this is what we use to actually calculate the rewards values. So as you can see, once you're tagging, there are various dashboards where this is all captured. Although this is a front end, this tool actually has an API that also that's allowed for the core GovOps teams I mentioned to actually receive on an automated manner all the payment data for all these different distribution channels. So I think one thing to highlight here is if we want to see an exact representation of what's sitting in SUSDS, in the Sky Farms, in the Chronicles, you'll notice just how big that untagged category is. And again, several reasons for that. Because our main distribution channels only started tagging in Jan, all the activity from, you can see it here, from September was untagged, the bulk from October, November, but actually a lot of that was distribution partners that we just weren't tagging in a timely fashion. The other big reason for this untagged activity, as I mentioned, is the really large deposits that tend to come from protocols such as Athena or whales that were able to identify bots and funds. They tend to not use any front end. They will just do a direct integration, and perhaps there's an opportunity actually for Start to work directly with a segment such as this. And not only does it build our intelligence of the attribution, but it's a revenue opportunity here if Stars can capture and tag this. So These dashboards, I mean, they're all open. The links are there. I sort of hope they add value. As always, what we're sort of looking to do is to provide sort of the utmost transparency for the wider ecosystem to just continue building on and iterating better and better. But yeah, maybe I'll pause there and see if there are any further questions.
Nice, Rajiv. Thanks for that. There are some questions in the chat. I don't know if you're reading it, but one of them was like how to kind of like get onboarded. So maybe you can give us a little bit more like concrete steps to start using the system.
I'm onboarded with a referral code, or
Yes.
onboarded.
Yeah, I think maybe I don't know if we have a process like there's a good process for this, but there's yeah, at least one person that's interested in actually trying to onboard some users. Maybe what we should do actually, thinking about it, is more like you can follow up with like a forum post or something on how community members can get signed up for participating in the accessibility award. And also, I mean, and the thing is, it's not like it takes some workload, so there's also got to be some kind of requirements in terms of like how serious the lead is, right? Because otherwise it could be a bunch of work to onboard a whole bunch of people and not actually result in anything or like distract from other work.
Yeah, that's fine. We could potentially leverage what we use for the first wave program as well, but we'll follow up to make sure there's a clear process that people can use.
Yeah, but it's like an interesting case, right? Because it's Chris and I mean, I've also seen others talk about this in the past, right? That so they're not a developer or like but it's more like they have contacts that are interested in getting into DeFi. So that's not really a case we've handled in the past, right? So that's something that yeah, can be explored. And I guess we will have to follow up. Not something we can like just improv in the call, I guess. Did you go through all the? Is it like did you go through all the data, Rajiv?
I went through it quite briefly. I'm happy to home in on anything else. Again, it's sort of here to provide questions based on
Is there
where
anything?
the interest lies.
So the one, sorry. So the one question that was other, like the one thing was, is there anything where you can see the age of the different, like of the stable coins? Because yeah, that is actually like a very interesting thing to track because of how things like breakage and lost stable coins and yeah. I don't know if you have anything like that currently.
Not at the moment. Certainly not from the work that we've done.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't directly tie into the other stuff, but that's something that could be interesting to add later, because I think like one thing is just like obviously Sky makes a lot of money from stable coins that have been dormant for a very long time and that are not earning rewards.
Noted.
But also it's just generally a really great measure of health that when we see in USDS, it appears to be that there are like a decent amount of USDS in circulation that is not earning rewards right now, and yeah, in my interpretation, that's a sign of health because it shows new users that are using USDS for payments. They're not immediately putting them into getting savings rates because they're sort of in transit, and it's indicative of a higher velocity, I think. It would be interesting to get like actual data on this, so that's something we can follow up on in the future.
Noted.
All right, so this is great, and I think what's going to be really interesting is to just continuously check in on these statistics, right, and see if they're going the wrong way or the right way or stagnating, and yeah, if I could imagine that this would have been very easy, like very interesting to kind of follow along with this if there'd been some data. We had done this for the last month, and then all the crazy Trump tariffs hit. How does that impact stablecoin flows and so on? But that's the kind of stuff that, of course, over time, the ecosystem will get better and better at having access to that data and process it. Even using cool dashboards and data visualization and AI to get information out of it that could help governance decisions or help identify opportunities for new stars. Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks, Rajiv and Meridian, for the presentation and doing all this work. I mean, and this is work that has been going on for I feel like it's going on for a year now. Since the beginning of, at least since the launch of USDS, and obviously there's a whole phase of preparing before then. So, are there any more questions for Rajiv, Meridian, and anything related to accessibility reward or USDS demand, or any general questions for me? Then we can chat a little bit and then close the call. Oh yeah, there was the Pioneer Star stuff. Yeah. Okay, we can get into that. Let me just see I see some other people typing. Let me just let's see what other topics there are. Okay. Well, I'll talk about Pioneer Stars first then. And then answer whatever, talk about whatever Chud is curiously typing out. So let's talk about Pioneer Stars. So first of all, the point of just very briefly, the point of the Pioneer Star is to give a huge amount of upside to a star that brings USDS and the Skylink primitives. So that's like SUSDS and basically other like core Sky features cross-chain to a new blockchain, and actually like pays for it, puts up the capital, does the work, builds it, gets the audits, so actually takes a lot of risk, and in return for taking that risk, gets a huge amount of upside for all adoption of USDS on this new blockchain. And then the question is like, how do you become a Pioneer Star? And this is like a pretty it's a very specific process. It is like the most I don't know, like specific and kind of rigid Sky primitive in that sense. And so the requirement is, first of all, a Pioneer Star has to be a brand new star that is created specifically to be a Pioneer Star. So this avoids the case where like Spark just gets the Pioneer status for every chain, right? Or like the big stars just like become the Pioneer Stars, right? What is actually more desirable is that the Pioneer Star for a particular blockchain is like very natively sort of involved in that chain and has its tokens distributed out to community members on that chain as well, right? So to encourage the likelihood of that, it has to be a completely new star. And then it's not just the first, like it's not a race. To be a Pioneer Star, the star has to be basically chosen by the core team of the blockchain that it is expanding to. And so that would be like typically like the DevCo or the foundation or whatever is representing the core team for that blockchain. And then like the executors will verify that, and then they will award the Pioneer status to the star that's aiming to become a Pioneer Star for that chain, if all the requirements are fulfilled. And then, like I said, there's huge upside, and it's really like the Pioneer Stars for the blockchains with actual activity on them is one of the things I consider part of like the gold rush, basically, that these are very attractive business models with pretty low downside, because it's like you're basically getting a lot of the upside from USDS in general. And definitely what we've seen so far with the expansion to Solana base and Arbitrum is that if you have a if you have a blockchain with a bunch of activity on it, then introducing USDS is gonna, there's gonna be some adoption of that. There's gonna be some circulation, and then as a Pioneer Star, you get to capture that. And of course, the Pioneer Star will be entirely focused on just like growing this blockchain further, so you can get a lot more done. Is, the core assumption and hope of the whole Sky ecosystem and the Star concept, right? That by creating the skin in the game and the token upside of delivering those results in expanding USDS to new chains, there's really going to be a lot of things happening in parallel, and level of scalable execution that Maker and Sky certainly were never able to pull off, but I think nobody has really been able to pull off in crypto, right? And the great hope is that the launch of many stars in parallel and scaling up of the stars is like the opening shot for a much more parallelized and scalable era of DeFi expansion and execution. Okay, I was waiting for Chud's wall of text. Okay, let me just read through it. So, will the accessibility rewards work the same for stuff like Spark liquidity layers, T-bill backing? If we're charging just below T-bill rate or SLL for the stability fee, and then also pay out accessibility reward on this USDS, feels like it could end up lower profitability than Block Tower / Circle and be infinite money glitch for Spark / any other star that deals in T-bills. Granted that Spark draining a bit of value for call still benefits us via Spark being valued, but it's not the end of the. Then there's a second question around rate setup. Okay, so yeah, I actually don't really understand this first question entirely, but I think what it's about is whether there can be situations where basically the Sky savings rate is like the Sky savings rate versus the base rate, which is like the borrow rate of the star, ends up being unsustainable, so that when you add the accessibility rewards on top, it doesn't, Sky's like losing money, and the bigger as USDS supply grows, Sky loses more and more money because it's basically like overpaying on one or the other side, or both sides. And so the answer is that in the long run, that'll not be the case, right? So there's always going to be a spread of 30 basis points between the base rate and the Sky savings rate. And so that of those 30 basis points, 20 basis points is the accessibility reward. And actually, during 2025, there is a bonus of 40 basis points to the stars on top of the accessibility reward. So during 2025, even when we normalize the base rate SSR spread, it will be like the economics won't work, and stars will get overpaid. But that's just like a kind of bootstrapping initial momentum strategy, and it aligns with the whole strategy of like normalizing everything and setting everything up for the long run and eliminating this type of stuff alongside the fixed expenses by the end of this year. And then as for rate setter, I believe it's coming like within weeks or days, so that rate setter should be coming very soon. Okay. Any more questions? Are you typing a question? Amongst, I'll answer it in the last 4 minutes before we shut down. But yeah, okay. Let's all hold our breath and see if a question is coming. And otherwise, well, in any case, thanks everyone for being for joining this first call on Discord. Yeah, and we should point out that this call ended up being maxed out at 25 people, so a lot of people couldn't join, which is too bad. But the good news is it's recorded, so I guess a lot of people will be watching this in the recording. And then next week it'll be much better and fixed. And yes, base rate will always be 30 basis points above SSR. So, or rather, this is a variable set in the atlas, and it might change, but this 30 basis points value has been set currently with the aim of trying to get to a value that could be very long term or even permanent. Obviously, it's going to take some careful scrutiny and thinking to really get at the ideal value. And yeah, it's hard to figure out exactly what a good rate here is for this what's like the sort of the total spread. So the 30 basis points is a bit of like a simplified value ultimately, but it fits nicely with Sky gets 10 basis points, the stars get 10 basis points, and then the integrators get 10 basis points. Okay, there's a couple of more questions, but let's close down the call now that it's been going for an hour, and then you can take those questions to Discord, and I'll be chatting there as well a little bit later. If you have questions for me, you can even tag me on Discord if you want to, and I'll make sure to answer them at some point. Thanks everyone for listening in.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Rajiv, and thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys.
Thank you.